Namaskar. Respected Adolit Buddaji from IIT Guwahati, Honorable Professor Sampanananda Mishra sir, respected Professor and Head of the Department, Sanskrit, Guwahati University, Sudeshna Bhattacharya, respected Sri Nilesh Marik ji, respected Professor Gautam Ghoshal ji, Ms. Mallika Ganguly from Aurobindo Foundation, my dear students and friends from IIT Guwahati. I stand before this august house to deliver the keynote speech of this conference on the theme Sri Aurobindo for the Youth. I feel indeed diffident, for neither am I a scholar, nor do I possess scholarship, nor am I an original thinker. Why then this audacity on my part? Whatever I do, think or say, I have a sense of offering them at the lotus feet of the Supreme Divine Mother. And this sense of surrender is the sole source of my strength and audacity. Let me first quote a passage from the writings of one of the great thinkers of the post-independent India, late Sitaram Goel, which I read while I was a student of just 12 standard, and which had a tremendous impact on my consciousness at that point of time. Sitaram Goel writes, let me quote, the partition of Bengal converted Bankim Chandra's Vande Mataram into a mantra, by reciting which our people scaled the highest heights of courage and sacrifice. But what made that brief episode important in the history of our fight for freedom was the emergence of another great seer and sage, that was Sri Aurobindo. He shot like a meteor across the political sky and soon retired into a self-soothed seclusion in search of a new vision and victories. But the trail he blazed in the realm of India's spirituality and culture yet holds the promise of a still more dazzling dawn. Sri Aurobindo confirmed and completed, let me repeat, Sri Aurobindo confirmed and completed the ideological war undertaken by his predecessors, Maharishi Dayananda, Bankim Chandra, and Swami Vivekananda. The national vision now became a vision which had fully awakened to Sanatana Dharma in all its dimensions. It was the ancient Vedic vision at its highest and best. Sri Aurobindo's insight into India's inheritance, spiritual, philosophical, cultural, artistic, social, and political, went very far in restoring our people's legitimate pride in their great past. He was very soon hailed as the prophet of Indian nationalism, unquote. Now, let me quote another passage from a book recently published titled Consciousness-Based Psychology, jointly authored by Dr. Soumitra Bosu and by Dr. Michael Mayuhi. The preface says that they have included many passages from Sri Aurobindo's writings in his own words. Why? They say, for how he says something is just as important as what he says. He knew how to convey not only the information, but the consciousness of that which he evoked, a fact which I have always been feeling ever since I started reading his books. My today's speech would largely therefore be a sort of compilation of passages from his writing in his own words. Who is then the contemporary youth? Who is then the contemporary youth? Let Professor Kirit Joshi, one of the finest ordained sadhak disciples of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, asks us to acknowledge that a radically different future is in the making. A radically different future is in the making. And the contemporary youth is surely alive to it, consciously or unconsciously. For he knows he is the central propelling force of the future. The unrest of the youth has therefore a meaning and a significance. The society at large must respond to him with a profound sense of understanding. He gives us a beautiful depiction of the changing horizons of the contemporary youth. Let me quote him. Professor late Kirit Joshi says, the contemporary youth looks with praised eyes at the expanding universe. He dreams of the voyage to Jupiter and Saturn. He has seen Earth from the moon as never before. The idea of planetary civilization is growing deep in him. He is a natural lover of internationalism. The world is shrinking. The world is shrinking by developments in transport, communication, commerce, industry, and technology. He is enthused by the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But he is troubled by the gulf between ideals and actualities. He cries out for the new world and the new man, but this requires new education. The Taittiriya Upanishad gives us an idea of ideal qualities of a youth in two categories. It says, firstly, let there be a young man, excellent and lovely in his youth, a great student, Yuva Sadhu, Yuva Adhyayaka. So let there be a young man, first excellent, lovely in his youth, and a great student. These are the first three qualities of a youth. Excellent, he has to be excellent, he has to be lovely in his youth, and he has to be a great student. Yuva Adhyayaka. Thereafter it says, let him have fair manners. Let him have fair manners, a most firm heart, and a great strength of body. Asistu, Drihistu, Balishta. Asistu, that is to say, let him have fair manners. Drihistu, a most firm heart, and a great strength of body, Balishta. In the words of the mother, youth is capacity to grow. Youth is capacity to grow and progress. One can remain young eternally if one makes progress one's goal of life, knows how to be reborn into new life at every moment, has an insatiable thirst for progress, and the conviction of a limitless possibility of progress. Let me reiterate at this point the clarion call of Sri Aurobindo addressed to the youth of this nation a century ago, which still holds not only relevance but power and profound promise too for reawakening the youth of the contemporary India towards the dazzling future with innumerable hopes and potentialities yet unmanifested. He uttered, and let me reiterate, our call is to young India. Our call is to young India. It is the young who must be the builders of the new world. It is the young who must be the builders of the new world. Not those who accept the competitive individualism. Not those who accept the competitive individualism, the capitalism of or the materialistic communism of the West. as India's future ideal. They cannot build a new world, nor those who are enslaved to old religious formulas, and cannot believe in the acceptance and transformation of life by the Spirit. But all those who can build a new world, all those who are free in mind and heart to accept a completer truth and labor for a greater ideal. They must be men who will dedicate themselves not to the past. They will dedicate themselves not to the past and the present, but to the future. They will need to consecrate their lives to an exceeding of their lower self, number one. Number two, to the realization of God in themselves and in all human beings, and to a whole-minded and indefatigable labor for the nation and for the humanity, unquote. Sri Aurobindo thus invites you to dedicate their lives not to the past or the present, but to the future. But this focus on the future is not therefore to be viewed or interpreted as damning of all the past endeavor of the race by him. For he always arrives at a creative synthesis. Amongst many apparent contrasts and inconsistencies. On one side, he says, we do not belong to the past dawns, but to the noons of the future. While, on the other, he emphasized that nothing has to be rejected. All has to be raised to the pure levels of the divine consciousness. He arrives at a creative synthesis amongst past, present, and future by asserting that past is our foundation, present as our material, and the future alone to be our goal and sumi. For we are children of the past, possessor of the present, but the creator of the future. He unambiguously declares that India of the ages is not dead. Nor has she spoken her last creative word. She lives and has still something to do for herself and the human peoples, even as he does not forget to remind us towards the unrealized future of the race. Let me go. But besides the comparison of the past and the needs of the present, there is to a viewpoint of the ideal future. There are the further goals toward which humanity is moving, and the present is only a crude aspiration towards them, and the immediate future we now see in hope and strive to bring about in form only its crude preparatory stage. There is an unrealized standard of the ideas which to the mind of the moment are figments of utopia, but may become to a more developed humanity the commonplaces of their daily environment, the familiar things of the present which they have to overpass. How stands Indian civilization with regard to this yet unrealized future of the race? Are its master ideas and dominant powers guiding lives or helping forces towards it, or do they end in themselves with no vistas on the evolutionary potentialities of the Earth's coming age? Unquote. At the same time, he is frank enough while cautioning us in no uncertain terms that the future has to go on to a greater and more perfect comprehensive development to evolve fresh powers, but not by damning the past or other cultures than our own in a spirit of arrogant intolerance. We need, he says, both the calm criticism as well as an eye of sympathetic intuition. We shall then be able to extract the good from the past and present effort of humanity to make the most of it for future progress. Sri Aurobindo was aware of the fact that the period of conflict and competition still overshadows the present of mankind. Individuals have, he says, reached the highest stage, but no people has yet reached that level. He therefore cautions us that laying down one's arms in a state of war is nothing less than inviting destruction with no compensating spiritual purpose. From this state of conflict arises, therefore, as he says, the necessity of a defense, and a strong, even an aggressive defense. He was advocating for aggressive defense, but what was that? For only an aggressive defense can be effective in the conditions of modern struggle. What then is an aggressive defense? He defines it as a new creation. He defines it as a new creation which must allow us an effective assimilation too. Effective assimilation of whatever is useful to our new life and can be made harmonious with our spirit. What then precisely is the new creation? Let me quote what Sri Aurobindo has precisely said about the new creation. What is that new creation? He says, a new creation of the old Indian Sadharma. He says, new creation of the old Indian Sadharma, not a transmutation to some law of the Western nature, is our best way to serve and increase the sum of human progress, unquote. The contemporary youth is indeed concerned with the prevailing system of education, for his future is intimately associated with and directly dependent on it. Sri Aurobindo is certainly an advocate of a national system of education. Yet, the questions as to what does it mean to him, we will deliberate on this at an appropriate stage. According to him, neither can information be the foundation of intelligence, nor can it be the chief of the means and necessities of education. It can only be part of the material out of which the knower builds knowledge. Therefore, it can only be the starting point or the nucleus of fresh discovery and enlarged creation. He even dares to assert that the education which provides only knowledge, the education which provides only knowledge is no education. What then is the central aim of a system of education? He affirms it is the building of the powers of human mind and spirit, not the providing of information, even the knowledge. He affirms it is the building of the powers of the human mind and spirit. He emphasizes that the various faculties of memory, judgment, imagination, perception, reasoning, the steady piece of thought and knowledge must be equipped properly. They must be trained to bring fresh materials and use more skillfully those of which they are in possession. Sri Aurobindo speaks of a foundation strong enough as the first necessity for the building up of a great intellectual superstructure to bear it. This foundation of the structure is nothing but a provision of a fund of force and energy sufficient to bear the continually growing demands of the different faculties of knowledge. But the central question still remains as to from where is that energy to be found. It is to be noted that all forces, all energy and power are latent in the being itself. Sri Aurobindo says that we will sacrifice no ancient form. But immediately after that he says, we will sacrifice no ancient form to an unreasoning love of sense. We will keep none. We will keep none which the national spirit desires to replace by one that is a still better and truer expression of the undying soul of the nation. In the backdrop of this statement, we will now see what does he mean by a system of national education. He unambiguously declares, and let me quote, mere inclusion of the matter of Indian thought and culture in the field of knowledge does not make a system of education Indian. He continues, it is not 18th century India, the India which by its moral and intellectual deficiencies gave itself into the keeping of foreigners, that we have to revive. But the spirit, the new creation is the new form of the old Indian Sadharma. It gave itself into the keeping of foreigners that we have to revive. But the spirit, ideals, and the methods of the ancient and mightier India in a yet more effective form and with a more modern organization. Unquote. In his preface of national education, Sri Aurobindo says that we cannot be satisfied with a mere resuscitation of some past principles, method, and system that may have happened to prevail at one time in India, however great it was, or in consonance with our past civilization and culture. That reversion would be a sterile and impossible effort, hopelessly inadequate to the pressing demands of the present and the far greater demands of our future. Unquote. What then is the idea of national education in the vision of Sri Aurobindo? He says, and let me read out, I presume that it is nothing more profound, great, and searching that we have in mind, and that whatever the difficulty of giving it shape, it is an education proper to the Indian soul. It is an education proper to the Indian soul and need and temperament and culture that we are in quest of, not indeed something faithful merely to the past, but to the developing soul of India, to her future need, to the greatness of her coming self-creation, to her eternal spirit. Unquote. Sri Aurobindo invites youth to consecrate their lives to a whole-minded and indefatigable labor for the nation and for humanity. Late Professor Kirit Joshi says that the contemporary youth is a natural lover of internationalism and the idea of planetary civilization is growing deep in him. Let us now ponder over Maharishi's vision of nation, if he is arriving at some creative synthesis here too between nationalism and universalism. Sri Aurobindo, who was hailed as the prophet of nationalism, poet of patriotism, and the lover of humanity in 1909 by Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das, while Kavi Guru addressed him as the voice incarnation of nation's soul, so as Attar Bani Murti. When the Kavi Guru addressed him as the voice incarnation of nation's soul, he uttered unhesitatingly, even during the period when the Swadeshi movement was at its peak, and he was one of the leading vendors, that India does not recognize the nation as the highest synthesis, to which we can rise. The statement is no doubt a shocking and a revealing one, even as all-embracing and a comprehensive one in all respect. But that is why, let me quote the full passage. He says, in India, we do not recognize the nation as the highest synthesis to which we can rise. When the Swadeshi movement was at its peak, then he uttered, in India, we do not recognize the nation as the highest synthesis to which we can rise. There is a higher synthesis, humanity. Beyond that, there is a still higher synthesis, the living, suffering, aspiring world of creatures, the synthesis of Buddhism. There is a highest of all. The synthesis of God, and that is the Hindu synthesis, the synthesis of Vedanta. Unquote. Is there then no value of nationalism in his idea and vision? Let me quote as he continues. With us today, after saying this, he then uttered, With us today, nationalism is our immediate practical faith and gospel, not because it is the highest possible synthesis, but because it must be realized. But because it must be realized in life if we are to have the chance of realizing the others. We must live as a nation before we can live in humanity. Sri Aurobindo thus says that we must live as a nation for humanity, as its helper and leader. He explains as to why we need to live as a nation before we can live in humanity. Let me read out as he continues. It is for this reason that the nationalist thinkers have always urged the necessity for realizing our separateness from other nations and living to ourselves for the present, not in order to shut out humanity, but that we may get that individual strength, unity, and wholeness which will help us to live as a nation for humanity. A man must be strong and free in himself before he can live usefully for others. So must a nation. Unquote. Yet Sri Aurobindo never forgets to remind us the ultimate aim of evolution. He continues, but that does not justify us in forgetting the ultimate aim of evolution. God in the nation becomes the realization of the first moment to us because the nation is the chosen means or conditions through which we rise to the higher synthesis, God in humanity, God in all creatures, God in himself and ourselves. Unquote. A few passages from the writings of K.D. Setna, alias the great Amal Kiran, would surely make us understand the profound significance of Sri Aurobindo's statement quoted just above. Amal Kiran says, the tide truly in consonance with the cathartic shock from Ramakrishna is summed up in the famous cry of Bankim song Vande Mataram. I bow to you, O Mother. The movement is basically religious. It is towards the divine. The country is viewed as a goddess who is not only its collective soul, but a face and form of the world mother, the creatrix of the universe. When the inner turn of the nation is mystical, even the patriotic fervor can be directed only to the divine spirit. And unless the country is felt as that spirit's emanation, this fervor will never fulfill the national life. Such is philosophy behind Vande Mataram, and it was sought to be made countrywide by Sri Aurobindo in his political days. Unquote. Amal Kiran continues, when it is the world mother that is worshipped, there can be no imprisonment in small formula. The mind is wide open to the world. At the same time, no loss is suffered. He was using a very beautiful word. No less is suffered of the delightful differentia. At the same time, no loss is suffered of the delightful differentia that constitutes nationhood. For the world mother is seen focused as the single unifying soul of the motherland. Unquote. In this context, I would like to bring before you a few things from the writings of Ram Swarup, the living sage of the post-independent India. When India finally lost, he says, both in the military as well as in the diplomatic contest, and realized that British were supreme, different people sought psychological rehabilitation in different ways. Under such circumstances, he says, some retired into their cell and became apathetic, while a majority met the situation by self-repudiation and wholesale imitation, after having filled with a deep sense of inferiority. This self-alienation led even those he eventually came to fight the British politically to surrender to them culturally. Fed by many sources, he says, this politics of self-alienation has now become increasingly more powerful and today seems to be dominating the contemporary India. Afterwards, he says, A measured reaction and strategy emerged. A military political inferiority was accepted, but reassertion took place at a religious spiritual level. Leaders like Dayananda, Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo went deeper into the truth of India's spirituality and convincingly felt renewed by it. At this point, let me allow to quote a few passages directly in his own words, in the words of the great sage Ramswarup. For them, India's struggle was more than political. For them, it had a rich spiritual content and had a deeper intent. India was fighting for Swarajya, for the Swadharma, for self-recovery. To many, it was sufficient if the British political control was withdrawn and replaced by a government controlled by the Indians themselves. But to these leaders, this was not sufficient. They wanted the country to realize its full potential, to wake up to its sole life, unquote. Ramswarup continues asserting that in this concept there was no parochialism. He says there was even no rejection of any truth the West had to offer. What the new leaders opposed was the mechanical imitation. Sri Aurobindo, on the contrary, taught us what he called assimilative appropriation, that is to say, Atmasat Karana in Sanskrit. We will surely borrow what is necessary, but what we can assimilate and transform in the light of our own Swadharma. For this keeps out the bastardization of the culture. It is to be noted that cultures are like individual organisms. They behave only that way. Ramswarup affirms, and let me quote him in his own words once again, thus nationalism to these leaders of the nation was only a temporary phase. We must live as a nation before we can live in humanity, said Sri Aurobindo. In traditional Hindu spirituality, it was all God. It was all God, compassion and humanity, and the truth of its own self-identity was neglected. The new leaders came and provided a corrective, and thus was born Indian nationalism. It was carved out of a larger truth, and it retained the impress of its original source. It remained rooted in the Hindu vision of human and cosmic unity, unquote. Ramswarup says, while explaining the nature of India's own distinctive universality, and let me read out in his own words, India's struggle for freedom was rooted in Hindu spirituality, which has a universality of its own. This universality, of course, has nothing to do with the universality of the multinationals or with the universality of hedonistic consumerism, nor with crusading and proselytizing religious trying to become universal through wars of conquest and organized falsehood. Nor has it to do with the vague internationalism under Marxist auspices made popular by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Indian worldview is not economic or political or ecclesiastical. India's message to itself as well as to the world, as propagated by its leaders, ancient and recent, was that of their spiritual self-recovery and self-discovery. Unquote. Sri Aurobindo says, those who are enslaved to old religious formula and cannot believe in the acceptance and transformation of life by the Spirit cannot build the future world. The mother says we have to change ourselves and undergo an inner transformation and rise to a higher consciousness in order to change and save the world. Sri Aurobindo therefore asks the youth to consecrate their lives to an exceeding of their lower self. Let me quote him once again as to why he is insisting on transformation of life by the Spirit. Sri Aurobindo says, a perfected human world cannot be created by man or composed of men who are themselves imperfect. Even if all our actions are scrupulously regulated by education or law or social or political machinery, what will be achieved is a regulated pattern of minds, a fabricated pattern of lives, a cultivated pattern of conduct, but a conformity of this kind cannot change, cannot recreate the man within. It cannot carve or cut out a perfect soul or a perfect thinking man or a perfect or growing living being. Unquote. Sri Aurobindo explains as to why a conformity of this kind, as quoted above, cannot change or recreate the man within. He says, for soul and mind and life are powers of being and can grow but cannot be cut out or made. An outer process or formation can assist or can express soul and mind and life but cannot create or develop it. One can indeed help the being to grow, not by an attempt at manufacture, but by throwing on it stimulating influences or by lending to it one's forces of soul or mind or life. But even so, the growth must still come from within it, determining from there what shall be made of these influences and forces and not from outside. This is the first truth that our creative zeal and aspiration have to learn. Otherwise, all our human endeavor is foredoomed to turn in a futile circle and can aim only in a success that is a specious failure. Unquote. The mother says, transforming oneself is the best way to help others, while perfection in oneself is actually a position to bring perfection to the world. Sri Aurobindo asserts that a spiritual ideal has always been the characteristics, idea and aspiration of India. But the progress of time and the need of humanity demand a new orientation and another form of that ideal. The old forms and methods are no longer sufficient for the purpose of the time spirit. India can no longer fulfill herself on lines that are too narrow for the great steps she has to take in the future. Unquote. He emphatically asserts that our ideal is not the spirituality which was already shown in the film, that our ideal is not the spirituality that withdraws from life, but the conquest of life by the power of the Spirit. Unquote. On the other hand, he says that the West has made the growth of the intellectual, emotional, vital, material being of man its ideal. But it has left aside the greater possibilities of his spiritual existence. Its highest standards are ideals of progress, of liberty, equality and fraternity, of reason and science, of efficiency of all kinds, of a better political, social and economical state, of the unity and earthly happiness of the race. These are great endeavors, but experiment after experiment has shown that they cannot be realized in their truth by the power of the idea and the sentiment alone. Their real truth and practice can only be founded in the spirit. The West has put its faith in its science and machinery, and it is being destroyed by its science and trust under its mechanical burden. It has not understood that the spiritual sense is necessary for the accomplishment of its ideals. On the other hand, he says the East has the secret of the spiritual sense, but it has too long turned its eyes away from the earth. The time has now come to heal the division and to unite life and the spirit. This secret too has been possessed by India but not sufficiently practiced by India. It is summarized in the rule of the Gita, Yogastha Kuru Karmani. But what is that? He says its principle is to do all actions in yoga. What that means? Its principle is to do all actions in yoga, that is to say, in union with God, on the foundation of the highest self and through the rule of all our members by the power of the Spirit. And this, we believe, to be not only possible for man, but the true solution of all his problems and difficulties. This then is the message. This then is the message we shall constantly utter, and this the ideal that we shall put before the young and rising India, a spiritual life that shall take up all human activities, a spiritual life that shall take up all human activities and avail to transfigure the world for the great age that is coming, unquote. But why did Sri Aurobindo came upon earth? But why did Sri Aurobindo came upon earth? The mother, the spiritual collaborator of Sri Aurobindo, whom we adore as the incarnation of the Supreme Divine Mother, says that Sri Aurobindo came to tell the world. Sri Aurobindo came to tell the world of the beauty of the future that must be realized. He came to give not only a hope, but a certitude of the splendor toward which the world moves. The world is not an unfortunate accident. It is a marvel which moves towards its expression. The world needs the certitude of the beauty of the future, and Sri Aurobindo has given that assurance, unquote. But what is that beauty of the future? But what is that future of the future? It is the manifestation of the supramental world. It is the manifestation of the supramental world. Let me quote the mother once again. Sri Aurobindo came upon the earth to announce the manifestation of the supramental world, and not merely did he announce this manifestation, but embodied also in part the supramental force and showed by example what one must do to prepare oneself for manifesting it, unquote. Let me now quote another passage from Sri Aurobindo's writing addressed to the youth of this nation, with which I would like to conclude my today's speech. He says, and let me reiterate, the future belongs to the young. The future belongs to the young. It is a young and a new world which is now under process of development, and it is the young who must create it. But it is also a world of truth. Courage, justice, lofty aspiration, and straightforward fulfillment which we seek to create. For the coward, for the self-seeker, for the talker who goes forward at the beginning and afterwards leaves his fellow in the lurch, there is no place in the future of this movement. A brave, frank, clear-hearted, asistu, dristu, bolisto, a brave, frank, clear-hearted, courageous, and aspiring youth is the only foundation on which the future nation can be built, unquote. With my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to the entire fraternity of Aurobindo Foundation and the Center for Indian Knowledge System, IIT Guwahati, I finally conclude here. Namaskar.